Welcome to Party Today we are going to discuss about the Indica of Megasthenes. The Mauryan period saw a steady expansion of trade with the Western world and the exchange of emissaries between Mauryan and Hellenistic kings. It is hence not surprising that Greco-Roman accounts mentions King Sandrocotus or Chandragupta and Amitrochatus or Amitraghat, that means Bindusar, and their capital Palimbotra or Pataliputra. Megasthenes was the representative of Seleucus Nicator at the court of Sivaitios, governor of Arachosia or the Kandahar area of Afghanistan. After a treaty was made between Chandragupta and Seleucus, he was sent as the latter's ambassador to the Mauryan court. Aryan refers to his visiting King Porus as well. As a royal ambassador, Megasthenes' exposure to Indian society must have been socially and geographically restricted. Information regarding the frequency and duration of his visit to the Mauryan court is unavailable. Megasthenes wrote a book called the Indica based on his travels and experiences in India. The book was not survived, but fragments are preserved in Greek and Latin works, the earliest and most important of which are those of Diodorus, Strabo, Arrian, and Pliny. Diodorus Siculus was a historian born in Agyrium in Sicily and lived in the second half of the 1st century BCE. Of the 40 books of his work, Bibliotheca Historica or Historical Library, only books 1 to 5 and 11 to 20 survive. The rest exist in the form of fragments cited in the latter work. The surviving books describe Alexander's Indian campaign and contain a general description of India based on sources such as Megasthenes Indica. Strabo was a geographer and historian born in about 63 BCE at Amasia in Pontus in West Asia. His geography consists of 17 books, of which the 15th deals with India and Persia. Arrian or Flavius Arrianus was a statesman, soldier, philosopher and historian born in Nicomedia in Bithynia. He wrote the Anabasis, an account of the Asian campaigns of Alexander, and his Indica was a continuation of this work. The first part describes India mainly on the basis of the accounts of Megasthenes and Eratosthenes. Gaius Plinius Secundus, better known as Pliny the Elder, was a Roman scholar. His book Naturalis Historia or Natural History consists of 37 books dealing with diverse subjects such as geography, ethnography, physiology and zoology. Megasthenes' observations are also cited by a Roman scholar, Claudius Aelianus, author of a book on zoology titled On the Peculiarities of Animals. All the references to Megasthenes occur in the texts that have a wider canvas than India. For these writers, India was the land beyond the Indus. We do not know whether they had direct access to Megasthenes' work or whether they relied on some secondary account of what he wrote. Nor were all their statements necessarily based on Megasthenes' Indica alone. The view of other writers such as Eratosthenes, Ctesias, Onesicritus, and Demicus are also mentioned. This may help explain the many discrepancies in detail in the account of Strabo, Diodorus, and Arrian. All these writers were part of an older Greek tradition of writing about other lands and people. They wrote for an educated Greek audience, and their aim was not only to inform but also to entertain. Later writers selected from Megasthenes' book the bits they thought would interest their audience the most and left out what they considered were the boring part, which might have been of great use to historian. They highlighted things about India that were similar to Greece as well as those that were curious and different. They ended up choosing more or less the same parts, but their narration was not identical. The references to the contents of the Indica are separated from each other by time and by the interest, interpretation, and style of their later writers. For instance, Pliny's work, which is later than the other three, is more factual and dry. Megasthenes Indica described the country, its size and shape, rivers, soil, climate, plants, animals, produce, administration, society, and legends. The Greeks were especially captivated by Indians' animals, and their accounts contained lengthy description of elephants, monkeys, horse training, and elephant hunting. Similarities with their own land were commented on. It was noted that legends indicated that India too was originally inhabited by primitive tribes, and that the arts and other things that improve human life were invented gradually. The Greeks referred to the Indians' worship of Dionysus and Heracles, the name that they gave Vasudeva Krishna. They cited similarities between the views of the Brahmanas, that is, Brahmanas, and Greek ideas relating to the nature of the world and soul. They idealized India when they stated that farmers were never touched in war, that there was no slavery, and that theft was rare. They also erred on several points. For instance, Alien cites Megasthenes and asserts that Indians did not borrow or lend money on interest. Similarly, Strabo states that Indians were ignorant of the arts of writing and fusing metals and never drank wine except as sacrifices. There were comparisons with Egypt and Europe. For example, Ganga and Indus were with the Nile and Danube, and it was observed that the most animals that were tame in the Greek lands were wild in India. There were also fantastic stories, such as those of one-horned horses with heads like those of deer, of huge snakes, and of the river Silas, in which nothing would float. Strange customs were recounted. Pliny cites Megasthenes' description of the men living on a mountain called Nulo. We are told that their feet turned backward and that they had 8 toes on each foot. He also states that on the other mountains there was a breed of men with heads like dogs who lived by hunting and fowling and communicated by barking. Gold-digging ants were said to live in the northwestern mountains. Diodorus left out many of these fantastic accounts. The Greek references to Megasthenes Indica represent India seen through a double filter. The first is Megasthenes' interpretation of what he saw or heard. The second is later Greco-Roman writers' interpretations of Megasthenes' account. The citations from the Indica seem to tell us more about ancient Greek perspective on India than about the history of the subcontinent in the 4th century BCE. This is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel, like our video and comment. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.